Today's episode of Lone Star Lawyers on the Varsity Podcast Network is brought to you by Varsity Search. Varsity Search builds great teams by connecting lawyers in Texas with career opportunities at small and boutique law firms. So if you're thinking of making a move or your law firm is looking to hire, please go to varsitysearch.com and book a time to visit right into my calendar. Varsity Search, building great teams. Hey everyone, Daniel Hare back with you on Lone Star Lawyers. I hope you and your family are both healthy and safe. And before we get started, I want to let you know about a few of the positions we are currently searching for. Quickly, we'll go through them now by city. In Dallas, continuing to look for construction litigators, general commercial litigators, and real estate/securities lawyers. So that's in Dallas. In Houston, looking for both estate planning as well as a plaintiff's personal injury lawyer. In Austin, a family lawyer, an estate planning lawyer, and an education lawyer. And then in San Antonio, insurance coverage lawyer and commercial litigator. So there's a bunch there. If any of those ring a bell with you or someone you know, I would love to talk with you or them. So I hope you'll get in touch with me, Daniel at varsitysearch.com. All right, today we are in Dallas, where our guest is Brandon Waddell. Brandon is the managing shareholder at Waddell Serafino, where he represents design professionals in various types of litigation, including construction defects and professional liability. And when he isn't litigating, Brandon also has negotiated hundreds of design and construction contracts for his clients. And Brandon was named a Texas Rising Star from 2014 to 2018, and then a Texas Super Lawyer in 2019 by Texas Monthly Magazine. He's also a frequent speaker at seminars and conventions on design professional liability issues. All right, with that, let's hop into our conversation with Brandon Waddell on today's Monday Mentors episode of Lone Star Lawyers. All right, Brandon Waddell joins us right now. Brandon, thanks for taking the time to be with us.
You're welcome.
Well, I'm excited to visit with you, and I appreciate you taking the time. And I know as we were just talking before we hit record here about your new offices that you just moved into recently. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about that right off the bat, because I'm seeing your office there in the background, and I was up there just last week. So tell us a little bit about it, because I think it's pretty exciting.
Absolutely. So our office, we wanted to accomplish a few goals. One, we wanted to impress our clients, but we also wanted to set up a space that would help them resolve their legal issues. So we put in a mediation center. We have 7 conference rooms with state-of-the-art technology so that we can bring people in regardless of their location in order to accommodate, because of COVID, which we'll talk about later, I'm sure, some issues that we're seeing with that. But at the same time, what we've tried to do is invest in our employees, because I'm sure, as a lot of people can appreciate, the ongoing work that we do in the legal field can be very taxing. Yeah. So we installed a 2,500 square foot cafe to reward our employees, to allow them to take breaks. And we have state-of-the-art Nespresso machines, so they don't have to spend their own money on Starbucks. We have something better for them up here. But in the back of house where we do the work, we also put in a lot of collaboration areas and solved a lot of issues through furniture and site layout. So there are about a dozen different places that you can go and take another attorney or up to 10 attorneys and go sit down and collaborate, draw things out on a board. Yeah. And last but not least, everybody has a sit-to-stand desk. So that's where things are moving, and it makes our days pass definitely a little bit more quickly. And right now I'm standing. I was sitting earlier.
I was about to ask you, what's for you? What's a percentage of the day that you spend in each position?
Well, I'm a stander, okay. So I stand about 90% of the time. Wow. So, others are the exact opposite. They might stand about 10% of the time when they need to stretch the back. Yeah. But it's been neat to see everybody take advantage of what we're offering and trying things out.
Well, and you mentioned in your description of your space there, some of the design layout, the furniture, some things like that. And that's important, especially because of who your clients are. And so tell us a little bit about your clients and the type of work that you do.
Sure. I represent design professionals. So that includes architects, engineers, and registered land surveyors. And what I do is I represent them all the way from project inception. So I'll negotiate contracts, and we represent them all the way post completion. And about 80% of our time is spent defending design professionals in lawsuits where a owner typically will file a lawsuit claiming that there was some type of negligence on the part of the design professional in the design that has created some type of damage to whatever structure it might be that they designed.
Yeah. And within that area, tell us a little bit about how you got into it, and what kind of your path was to that, because it's a subspecialty of a subspecialty in some ways, but yet it's a very robust area, and it seems like there's a lot of growth in that. And I think people that are in their first few years of practice, kind of thinking about, hey, where do I want to go with this thing in terms of my career path, may not be super familiar with it. So talk about it a little bit.
Yeah. So, the way that I got into this field was because of practice court at Baylor. I'm not kidding. My practice court partner represented Wachovia Bank, and there was an engineering client whose bank account got garnished because of a default judgment. And when the garnishee engineering firm contacted my former PC partner, he said, "You should call Brandon Waddell. He could probably help you out." So they contacted me, and long story short, about 72 hours later, they were able to make payroll. My first reported case ever was overturning that default judgment.
There you go.
And I solved a problem that another law firm couldn't solve. So after that first client fired the other law firm and transferred 5 files to me. 3 months later, he gave me 40 more files, and then became my biggest advocate in the industry, telling all of his friends that there was a young kid who was cheaper and knew more than his competitors. So
you can't beat that.
It started off with one client.
Wow.
And it has grown into me being, honestly, probably the number one preferred attorney in Texas to represent design professionals. And now I have 10 attorneys on my team.
Yeah.
And that's all transpired in about 15 years.
That's amazing. Well, congratulations on that. And what's kind of the latest in terms of either trends or things that are happening within your practice area, or maybe within your client's business and industry that you're paying attention to? I'm thinking about if I were to go to a CLE, or you were to put together a CLE topic for next month's big CLE thing on your area, what would be some of the hot topics that would be on people's minds?
So right now there's really two. Every CLE that I wind up doing, and really more for the practicing professionals, is I always tell them it's easier to learn from others people's mistakes than your own. So I do a lot of case studies and things of that nature. But right now, what's garnering the most attention is what's transpiring down in Austin. Senate Bill 219 is in the process of being redrafted. And Texas, interestingly enough, is the only state in America that has what we call the Longren doctrine. And what it states is that a contractor can be responsible for errors and omissions in the design if the contractor, through reasonable diligence during the bid process, should have recognized that type of design error. Well, it's a good doctrine from my perspective because I represent design.
Which side were you? Oh, yeah, no, that's good.
Right? Exactly. So, we've been working a lot on that, trying to explain to the legislators why the doctrine should not change to what we call the Spearin doctrine, which was actually a United States Supreme Court case. And what you find in this industry is it's all about risk shifting. Yeah. You have an owner, you have an architect, and you have a contractor. They are all going to have an interest in the project. And the big question is who is going to bear the risk? And the market plays that out. And if the owner is going to bear the risk, it's going to be cheaper to design and build whatever structure you want to design or build. If the contractor is going to bear it, it's going to be more expensive to construct it. If the design professional is going to bear it, it's going to be more expensive to design it. So that's what's playing out behind the scenes right now.
Interesting. Okay. Well, and you touched on it just a little earlier. Did want to revisit it real quick, and that's just how COVID has been impacting your firm and your clients. And we're recording this, it's March 24th. And so for people listening to this later or much later, things hopefully have changed, continued to get better. But at this moment, what is kind of the state of things for you all as it relates to COVID?
Right. Well, let me start off first with the clients, because I think it's really interesting with the type of work that I do. So architects don't only design the structure, and same with the engineers, but during the construction phase, they make periodic site visits to check for general conformance of the construction with their plans. Well, once we had COVID hit, and you had, typically projects didn't shut down. They were deemed a essential business. But a lot of firms, not knowing what to do and not knowing much about COVID in the early times, they would not release their employees. And a lot of employees were stating they weren't willing to visit project sites. Yeah. So what we had to do quickly was find a way in order to keep the project progressing on schedule, because we would be liable for the delay if we didn't do the observation or inspection. So we wound up getting consent from owners, drawing up contracts in order to allow the contractor to literally walk around with an iPad and do a FaceTime with an architect or engineer to get a visual observation. Yeah. But at the same time, we can all appreciate when you're looking at something in 2 dimensions instead of 3 dimensions, and you might have a $400 million structure. Yeah. And your observation is essential, you're probably going to have a different level of standard of care. Right. And I wanted that definitely in the contract. So there was a lot of negotiations on that side. Now, when it comes to the law firm, I have to hand it to my employees. They've adapted, and they've adapted well. We were lucky enough to have the foresight to invest in technology. So everybody was already, we already had remote capabilities. Yeah. We're generally a paperless firm. But what transpired through that was coordination. It took extra steps to coordinate. And at the same time, for associates, the shareholders really had to step it up on training and keeping track of their associates, checking in not only from, a welfare, of the family, and checking in on all of them, but also from the state of their practice and making sure that they continue to grow, even though they were isolated in their homes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it certainly has been a test of law firms' leadership, management, technology adaptation, like you're talking about. And so I'm glad to hear that it seems like you've been able, both you and your partners, shareholders and employees, the lawyers there and staff have been able to adapt and move forward. And so I hope that, and as you've been able to, I'm sure it's played into too, how as you're moving into the new office in the midst of that as well. Like what, I imagine it informed some of your late decisions, not that you had a lot of time there to squeeze changes in, but right. What timing. Well, I want to transition a little bit and ask you some just advice for lawyers as they're getting going in their practice. These young lawyers are year 1, 2, 3, 4 in practice and still figuring it out, still trying to figure out where they're headed. What's something that you remember back when you first started, that a piece of advice or something that you learned that has stuck with you all these years and is an important part of who you are now still as a lawyer?
Yeah. So I have to go back to my childhood because it applies. My parents told me at an early age, you have one reputation. Think about that. You don't have two, you have one. So the group that I'm with, it's pretty humbling. The group that I'm with, it was my second law firm, and I started with them in my second year. And as a young lawyer, taking that knowledge and my father had passed on to me about my one reputation, you have a first impression. And to couple that with the golden rule of treat others the way you'd want to be treated, if you can look at the shareholder and say, from a shareholder's perspective, how would they want me to approach this case? If you're able to have that vision, you are already at least 3 or 4 steps ahead from your other competitors vying for the same job. Because when you start thinking like a lawyer and thinking like a shareholder, then you will show potential and use all the knowledge that you've learned based on the books that you've read and all the classes that you've taken. It really takes a vision to be a great attorney. And that's what happened with me. I worked a lot. I put in the extra time. I did all of that. And, I think a lot of younger attorneys put too much stock into hours. What I try to look for is quality hours. Okay. Because yes, while hours are wonderful and they produce revenue, we need the quality coupled with that. And I would much rather have an attorney working for me that gave me fewer quality hours with wonderful work product rather than have a bunch of hours that created more work for me to clean up.
Yeah, absolutely. Following up on that, like for a, what's maybe an example or kind of a practical way that you see it play out from an associate who treats the job or treats the work like an associate, and then an associate who treats a project or the work like a shareholder and has that bigger, broader vision? How would one recognize that? What does it look different, in terms of, and maybe it's that it turns into those quality hours versus numbered hours, but practically, what does that look like? What's an example of that?
So let's use a hypothetical.
Sure.
I give a case to an associate, and this is actually one of my real cases. I got a phone call about 6 months ago. Brandon, there's been a collapse. It happened an hour ago. 2 hours later, I'm on site with a hard hat and safety vest. We're investigating it all. Okay. I come down, I sit down with the associate and I say, we're in this case now. We've got a collapse. Here is what we need to do. Okay. But here are the legal issues. The associate who's acting like an associate would come in my office a week later and say, we talked about those legal issues. Tell me more about them. Right. The associate who's acting like a shareholder would come in and say, we talked about those 4 legal issues. Here's what I think about them. And here's why, based on my research and what I found, this is the strategy that I think we should employ. We should assert the economic loss doctrine based on contractual privity. We should do this. We should do that. Because the only way that you can train in order to develop that strategic mind that really separates the great attorneys from the good attorneys is to employ your own strategy and have it tested by your peers and also the shareholders. And that's the best way that I can train people, isn't to tell them how to do it. Right. Because at that point, you're just a coach and your team is always going to be looking at you to call the play. I want my associates, when they become shareholders, to no longer ask me what the play call is, but to not only know what play to call, but have confidence that that's the right play call given the sets of facts and circumstances.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Is there anything that you learned more recently, like within the last few years, that you wish you had known or that you wish someone would have told you when you were getting started?
I think when I was getting started, the phrase work-life balance gets thrown around a lot, right?
Yes, it does.
I think for everybody, it's different, right? But I think what I would have liked to have known, and I will say this is a good problem to have, but nevertheless it's a problem, is knowing that once you're growing, to be able to anticipate that growth. Because what I have learned is it's better to be proactive than reactionary. It's better for your own work-life balance because, Daniel, we've placed a couple of attorneys in my office in the past, 30 days. Yeah. And we had a third one about 4 or 5 months ago. And now we're being proactive.
Right.
And since we placed yesterday, I got 4 new cases.
Perfect.
So it's good. But when I was being reactionary, I was working 14, 16-hour days while trying to find somebody. And you think that you can find the right person easily. What I've learned is it's better to wait and be patient and find the right person rather than just get somebody in who's going to bill those hours instead of quality hours.
Yeah. No, and we talk about it here quite often, and it's just, look, I mean, you are not alone. I mean, in a firm environment where, and I kind of take like the mega firms out of it that kind of operate like multinational corporations, the rest of us are all running small businesses at some level or another. And as lawyers, your first duty and obligation is to your clients, and you're trying to provide that great service. And that administrative role of the shareholder we talk about work-life balance. How about just practice administration balance? I mean, that's tough, right? And so recruiting falls into that, and hiring falls into that, and training falls into all those things that somewhere deep inside you got to do it, or ultimately the client won't get served well. But it's hard to figure out how to do that. And so many firms wind up, like you're talking about, just hiring only when the firm is completely stretched thin and everyone is just on their last nerve. It's okay, now we need to go hire someone. And you do wind up a lot of times in that situation, taking a little bit more risk on the hire because you just feel like you have to get someone in to do the hours, as opposed to being able to plan it out, be more proactive, and take a longer view of it and get the right person that fits your team best and fits your clients best and all of that. And that's just hard to do. I mean, and it's what we preach and it's what we talk about. We think it's important, so I appreciate you saying that in terms of at least the way it manifests in recruiting for you. But it's hard. And I mean, I don't know how you all do it with all the other things you have going on.
There's some long nights and weekends, no doubt.
Absolutely. So what is, we kind of talked about, what associates can do to impress you, kind of talking about acting like a shareholder in that lesson you'd learned early. What are, 1 or 2 things that are kind of, either pet peeves or things that you just kind of bad habits that you see associates get into, or things that you try to correct when you see them early on?
So I'm probably a little bit different than most attorneys. Whenever I interview anybody and I give them an offer, I give them a speech and I tell them I hire professionals. You don't have to ask me for time off. You don't have to be here at 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. You don't have to stay until 6 p.m. If you need to ask me what your hours are to get your work done, you're not a professional. But professionals also know when they can afford the time away from the office to recharge their batteries, and that is essential. Yeah. And if I see you not doing that, I will order you to take a vacation because I have seen what a lack of vacation can do.
Yeah.
So that's something that I think a lot of people it gets back to those quality hours versus number of hours, right? I mean, there's some firms out there that the only yardstick that they judge by is quantity, right? We're different here. But at the same time, some negative impressions. I also cut a deal with every person that I employ on their first day. And the deal is, if you mess something up, because we're all human, okay, the standard of care is not perfection.
Right.
If it is, we will all fail. So thank goodness it's not. Yeah. But if you mess something up and you don't tell me about it, and I find out, no matter how much I like you, no matter how great of work you do, you're gone. because it's integrity.
Yep.
And I have to be able to trust everybody on my team. And I always knock on wood when I say this. I have yet in my career to have an issue that's arisen in my practice that turned out to be a real issue or one that we couldn't fix. Okay. And, thank goodness also the biggest issue that we've ever had is, there was a deadline for responses to discovery that were missed and objections were waived. Well, the good thing is in my industry, I know all the attorneys. It's a simple phone call. But if the associate didn't tell me about that and we had gone to trial and waited until that point and offered in evidence, that would have been a call to our malpractice carrier.
Yep.
So that's the best recommendation I can give to everybody. It's tough to admit your own faults, but if you can develop a level of trust with your supervising attorney to say, I will do my best to never mess up anything, but if I do, I will bring it to you so we can collaborate, put our minds together, have some collective wisdom, as I like to call it, to figure out how we fix the problem before it's too late to fix it. That's the key.
Yeah. I think that's really good. And I think it's good for people to hear. I think that you mentioned the standard not being perfection. And I do think that that's what, a lot of people that are lawyers were always, straight A students all the way through school and got into law school and did well there. And perfection basically has been the standard for most of their lives. And so they get to a point where, realize that, hey, it's not a realistic standard. You are going to make some mistakes. And so there's, a level of grace and permission there to be able to do that with integrity and learning from them and getting better. It's why it's the practice, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, let me just couple onto that. Going through law school, especially at, a competitive school like Baylor, everybody seems to be kind of pitted against themselves, right? And we're always in a competition. Well, you said it earlier, our duties to our client. How are we going to deliver the highest level of service, give them the best argument, the best brief, give them the best opportunity and chance for a successful outcome? Well, it takes a heavy helping of humble pie for each attorney to admit that they are not the most brilliant person on every single issue that is in the law firm.
Yeah.
And that's why I say the phrase collective wisdom. And I tell my partners, I tell my associates, we are smarter together than we are apart. Okay? Bring me in. I will collaborate with you.
Right.
I'll look at it from a different perspective because so many times, I still think this, what makes a great attorney is looking at the weaknesses and identifying the weaknesses in their case and anticipating what the arguments will be from the other side. But sometimes we get so invested in our cases, we don't want to admit that we're weak.
Yeah.
That's why you have collective wisdom. And if you do that and you're willing to collaborate with others and say, you know what, that's a great idea that I didn't think about. You're going to deliver better services to your clients. You're going to get more business from it. And at the same time, everybody's going to feel like they're making a contribution to the collective good of the firm.
Yeah, that's good. We talked a little earlier just in passing about hiring and recruiting. And I do want to ask you a couple of things about that. When you're going through the process, as you have been over the last 6 to 12 months of really growing and expanding and hiring, what are some of the key things that you're looking for in candidates? And let's start just talking about what you're looking for on a resume or on paper and credentials, that type of thing. What are the things that jump out to you?
So in my practice, it's a little bit different because if you come into my practice, you are going to have to learn architecture, engineering, things of that nature. So I don't hire people with just engineering backgrounds or something of that nature. It's quite the opposite. I look for people who are learners, who don't feel like because they've graduated law school, they never have to learn again. If you come and work for me, every single project's going to be different. And it's fascinating. So I tell a lot of people, if you love the Discovery Channel, great, because 50% of what you do here is going to be Discovery Channel.
Right.
If you like Law and Order, great. That's 50%. But if you haven't mastered the Law and Order piece of it, then with the additional training and learning you're going to have to do, you're probably not a great fit. Okay. But that's just for my practice. Firm wide, what we look for is that integrity piece.
Mm-hmm.
We really look for people that we feel like are true to themselves and true to us. And if that makes sense, like through the interview process, and we might talk about that a little bit later, but we try to tell, and attorneys, especially, ones with almost 20 years of experience like myself, you can size people up pretty well, and you can tell if somebody's being themselves and they're relaxed and comfortable or not. And we want people who will honestly fit and gel. I mean, this is, again, our firm might be a little bit different. There's a lot of firms like us, but we're family up here. And, we try to keep it, a good cohesive family instead of one where you see each other once at Thanksgiving dinner and only talk about who you voted for, and, things end pretty horribly.
Right. And I did want to give a little more context for people because, you mentioned your team is around 10 or so, but firm-wide, where are you at now, lawyers-wise?
We have about 40 lawyers.
Yeah, about 40. Okay. So just for a little more context in what you're talking about between your team and your practice and some of the others around the firm. Okay. So when you get someone into an interview setting, how do you go about trying to identify some of those things you mentioned that are important? How do you flesh that out? And what have you seen from candidates that can prepare themselves well for the interview process?
Sure. So, again, I keep saying we're different. I conduct my interviews very differently. Okay. I'm usually the first one to talk. And I say, this is you interviewing me and me interviewing you. Mm-hmm. Because I've learned, unless both parties are invested, it's just not going to work out. Right. Mm-hmm. So I want people to know what they're going to be doing and understand that. And I would suggest to everyone who listens to this podcast to do that. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And also, if you have the luxury of having multiple offers or being patient on taking a job offer, take one where you have a reasonable anticipation that you're going to enjoy not only what you're doing, but who you're going to work with.
Yeah.
Because my first job, I didn't enjoy what I did, and I didn't enjoy who I worked with. Okay. Right. So, but it was a paycheck.
That's right.
And I needed that paycheck. Right.
Sure.
So, and again, it's a luxury if you have it. But, going through that interview process, once I tell people what we do, and, those watching or listening, you can probably understand my passion for what I do. I feel like I won the lottery with what I do because I love it.
Yeah.
If going through this process after talking about it, I really want to hear from people if they think they're going to have a passion for it. Mm-hmm. Because if you don't, you're going to get burnt out. And I want my people on my team to be happy. Yeah. I want them to enjoy what they do. And if you're not going to enjoy it, it's okay to say no.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's funny that you mentioned that because I think I can't remember which of the lawyers that you've hired recently where I had this conversation with them on the very front edge of the process where I recounted to them the first conversation that I had with you in your conference room in your old office, and you were telling me about what you did. And so what I was telling this candidate was how enthusiastic about the practice that you were and how much you enjoyed it. And so at the time I wasn't sure. And so my counsel to the person was, so like, if this is something that you are going to just because it's for the money or for a paycheck or just for, it's not going to work out well because there are going to be people around you, namely Brandon, but others who really love this stuff. And it's going to feel weird if you're the only one there that like is just there to punch the clock and like that. And so I remember I had that conversation because and I think it's great. It's great to get that all talked about up front as you're talking about the interview back and forth and you interviewing them interviewing you to kind of get a sense of whether it makes sense for both sides because, and I always say it's not a good or bad thing. It's just here's what the situation is and will you be a good fit there? Will you enjoy it there? And kind of the same thing,
Right. And honestly, too, I think that's where the honesty needs to come in. Hopefully, and I want the candidate to be able to gauge the honesty from the shareholder because the part of the interview process, when I interview a candidate, I'm trying to sell my law firm to them. I'm trying to sell my practice to them because I want that candidate to come work for me. And not only that, I want them to be happy.
Yeah.
Now, the worst thing I could do is misrepresent what my law firm offers or what my practice does. The same goes for the candidate.
Yeah.
If you come in and you tell me I have taken 80 depositions and they have been of general contractors and I've done construction law for 3 years and I rely on all that, and then the first project I give you, you come to my office and say, what's an RFI? Well, that's a request for information. And if you've taken 80 depositions and represented general contractors, that should be the last question you ask me, right?
Yeah.
So you can definitely fake your way through an interview. You can't fake your way through a job, especially one as complex as what we do.
Yeah.
So, I know that the temptation's there, especially when you're just hitting the job market, you need a job. But at the same time, like Daniel said, it's not going to end well. And not only that, going back to what my dad taught me, you have one reputation.
Yeah.
And now on your resume, you have a law firm that you work for that's probably not going to give you glowing remarks.
Yeah.
Because you weren't forthright in the interview process.
Absolutely. And kind of the last thing I'll mention about this that you just made me think of is this was not in a situation with one of your searches or candidates, but in another situation where after talking with the candidate, talking with the firm, I just straight up advised the candidate, look, I don't think this is a good fit for you. She had the offer and it could have accepted it. And I said, I just think from everything that you've told me and now everything that, I'm hearing about, it just doesn't seem like it's the right fit. And she said to me, I don't think you're supposed to be telling me that. You're the recruiter. This is like your commission. You're losing. I was like, no, but I'll lose way more in the long term if I push you towards something that's not a good fit, because you're going to wind up leaving in a few months. You'll be unhappy. The firm's going to be unhappy. Everyone's going to. And I've never heard a recruiter say that before. I said, well, I really do. I want you to be happy. I want the firm to be happy. And I believe in building great teams. And that's what we say. And it's not just a tagline, like we really mean it. And so I want you to be happy. And if that's this place, then great. But that's just not what I'm hearing right now from you or from them. But here's this offer. And so it really is that honesty and integrity and just being honest even with yourself as a candidate. I think a lot of times is like you can kind of talk yourself into stuff. I've been guilty of that in my career before, about trying to talk myself into taking something that I knew deep down probably wasn't the right thing because there's so many good things about it. But it's really important to get those things right and to do it up front.
It is. And also, it's good for you to be giving that wisdom to people that where you can identify based on your experience. But also, I'd suggest that, for people talking with you, that they ask your opinion, or, talk to others in the industry confidentially and say, I've got this offer. This is what I'm hearing, and it's okay because, and honestly, I had an attorney that I just made an offer to last week, and he knew a lot about our firm, but he had also somewhat worked in the industry. And he said, would you mind if I contact these people? I said, no, contact whoever you want.
Yeah.
And I said, I can give you a list of names, but if you want to, I will. But I almost don't want to. I want you to randomly pick people.
Yeah.
You call them. You ask them what I'm like as a person, because remember, I have one reputation.
Yeah.
And it's good to know that you have the confidence that whoever he picked up the phone and called, I shouldn't have to worry about who that individual was going to call and what they had to say about me in my practice.
Right.
And I'll expand on that just for a moment. I've still got 25 years left in my practice. I've been doing this for 20.
Yeah.
If I mess up my reputation now, I have to live with it for the next 25 years. Nothing is worth that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we are nearing the end of our time. And before I ask you our rapid fire questions that we close with here, is there anything that we haven't talked about yet or anything that you'd like to add before we wrap up?
No, I'm ready for the rapid fire.
Oh, okay. You're ready. I love it. You're rapid firing already. All right, here we go. Rapid fire questions. Name one trait or characteristic that you most want to see in an associate.
I would say integrity.
Yeah, that's good. What habit has been key to your success?
Diligence.
There you go. Your favorite app or productivity tool?
Spotify. Because it makes me more productive. Yes,
it makes you more productive. Actually, and I'm adding a part B to this question. What's your pen of choice? This came up in a forum the other day. What pens are lawyers using these days? What's your pen of choice?
A Pilot Precise V5.
Pilot Precise V5. I literally have got like several here that I'm testing out from people that had these in these forums. That was not on this list, so I'm excited to try that one.
It has to be an extra fine.
An extra fine. Okay.
Yes.
Extra fine. Got it. Everybody hear that?
When you're marking up plans.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, that might not be necessary for a lot of lawyers to have that level of fineness, but for those that are marking up on blueprints and plans, absolutely. All right, your favorite social distancing activity?
I'm a father of two, playing with my kids. Yeah. It's an easy one, but honestly, they bring more joy, and it is the exact opposite of practicing law.
Right.
Being the kid again.
And lastly, your favorite legal movie?
Has to be The Firm.
There you go.
Tom Cruise. Yeah, he did a great job. So John Grisham, excellent author.
Yes, he is. Awesome. Well, Brandon, thank you again so much for taking the time to be with us. I appreciate it, and I know the audience and those listening do as well. So thank you for being with us.
All right, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
All right, my thanks again to Brandon Waddell for joining us on the show today. If you enjoyed this episode, would you consider doing two things for me? Would you subscribe so you don't miss an episode? And then would you rate and review the podcast in Apple Podcast or wherever you listen? And if you have suggestions or thoughts about the show, or if I could help you in any way, you can email me, daniel@varsitysearch.com. Likewise, email me there. If you're interested in any of the opportunities that we mentioned earlier, or just want to visit about what might be out there for you on the market and learn a little bit about what's going on right now in the Texas legal market, would love to touch base with you and have that conversation. All right, that's it for today's episode of Lone Star Lawyers. Thanks again so much to each of you for listening. I'm Daniel Hare with Varsity Search, and we'll talk with you next time.